Good morning, everyone. This is kind of an odd angle here for you, but I am Bob Adler. I'm the Dean of the S.J. Quinney College of Law. I want to welcome you. We're waiting for one of our four faculty speakers. She has a very young baby, and she might have been delayed because of that, but we're going to get started anyway. I know that I'm welcoming some of you to the College of Law, some of you to the University of Utah, some of you to the state of Utah. Some people are actually watching remotely, so high out there in TV land. It's important because I am going to be repeating your questions, if you think that's odd, so that they can hear it and that everyone understands what the questions are. So let me begin by congratulating you. You've all obviously been admitted to a very fine law school. Our admission standards remain very high. So you should be proud. There's a lot of other law school applicants out there in the country who are envious of your position. So I know it can be a little bit stressful making a hard life decision, but it's a much better place to be in, right, than the opposite of not having any decision to make. So good luck in that. And in fact, our main goal today is to try to help you to make a sound and rational decision for you. We know that you've got multiple choices. There's a lot of good law schools out there. We hope that the right decision for the most if not all of you is to come here, but we understand that it's a choice. So we want to encourage you to ask questions. Today in this session, later today, we spent a lot of time checking you out, so fair is fair. It's your time to check us out. And after today as well, we would encourage you to communicate with Dean Aguilar, our admissions staff, with me. If you have questions for me, please feel free to email me, call me. I can't promise that I'll get back to you right away, but I'll get back to you as soon as possible to answer any questions. So let me, just for an overview, give you at least a few reasons why you might consider us, at the risk of being redundant of what Dean Aguilar and others have told you. Three main reasons. One is our size. We're small by design. We're small by choice. And I know that a lot of law schools have shrunk in recent years due to circumstances. We have a little bit, but we have always been small, and we like being small. So let me tell you a few of the reasons why we like being small and why it's good for you. We have among the best student-to-faculty ratios in the country, top 10 for at least the last 15 years or so. That means we have very small classes. A big class at the College of Law is maybe 50 or 60 students. A small class in a seminar might be 6, 8, 10, 12 students. In your first year, we guarantee every student one small section in one of the major substantive classes of about 20 to 22 students. That allows us to treat you like individuals. It allows you to give us to give you personal attention to make sure that your needs are met. And we do that, frankly, from intro week through graduation and beyond, in terms of our ability to help you in the job market, to help you as young attorneys. We know you, and we will continue to know you. Second is location. Location, obviously, we have the best snow on earth. We've got great trails, great outdoor recreation, but there's a lot of more important things in terms of your education. First is our location on campus and the proximity to downtown. And we chose this location for the new law school very purposefully. We are on campus. It's a very thriving campus. There's a lot of interdisciplinary activity, a lot of things going on. So unlike some law schools, we did not choose to move downtown. However, we're right across from the TRAX light rail. We're about 10 minutes from downtown. That means that for your jobs, for your internships, for your pro bono activities, if you want to go down to the courthouse, Some people assign people to go observe trials or other proceedings, or you can do that on your own. It's 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes downtown. So we've got this perfect balance between being on campus and being right adjacent to the state capitol with so much going on. Second part of the location is, of course, the new building, which is gorgeous. And in previous years, I needed to describe how great the building was going to be. Now it speaks for itself. I hope you take the opportunity to walk around the building or take a tour later today to see what's going on here. Much better teaching spaces around the building. I had a meeting yesterday morning with one of our architects, and one of the people we've actually retained to study building use here and how the building is doing. And they said that the comments from the students were, the views are spectacular everywhere in the building, including in the classrooms, and the natural light and the spaces make them feel much more at home, and that this is a place they really want to be. We have 3 dedicated practice court rooms in addition to this large moot court room. We have research and learning modules for our law clinics, for our law journal, for student activities, for our clinical programs. And we have much better and more diverse living space for students, places for you to study throughout the building. You will see during the fall and spring semesters people out here studying. People studying down on levels 3, 4, and 5 with soft seating areas, with tables, with carrels, with small study rooms. Students feel really at home here because they have so much choice about where to hang out. Third reason why you should consider us, and it's the most important, is really quality. We have focused on quality for more than a century. We're now in our second century of legal education. The rankings are one of many indicators. We maintain strong rankings this year, top 50, where we usually are. Those things are very volatile. We tend to be very consistent in our quality, but it's just one of many measures of quality. Low debt. We're the 3rd lowest debt on graduation of the top 50 law schools in the country. So look at quality, also look at value. 7th ranked school for environmental law. So if you're interested in environmental law or any of the related fields, we've got a superb program. And a big focus of our quality is on teaching. So the panel we have this morning, and we'll get to them in just a few minutes, is going to talk about our teaching and our educational philosophy. But just as some evidence of our teaching quality, last year, 2 of our law school faculty members won university-wide teaching awards. This year, one of our faculty members, Jency Anderson, won the University Distinguished Service Award because of her service teaching, because of the ways that she involves our students in service learning in the community through the Rocky Mountain Innocence Center. So teaching is a major part of our focus and who we are. And so I want to comment for just a couple of minutes about this debate nationally about the traditional law school mode of teaching lawyers how to think versus teaching people how to practice law. And my personal view is that it's a silly debate because you need to learn all, and we need to teach all of you all of that. We need to teach you legal theory, legal doctrine, legal analysis and thinking, and we need to teach you skills, and we need to balance those. And that's our focus. Our focus is on balance. Our focus is on teaching you to become good lawyers and broad, well-educated lawyers in every meaning of that word. Our recent achievements bear that out. Top 2 to 3 schools in the country perennially for live client training. Last year, we were second only to Yale in the number of live client training experiences we provide per student. 90% or more of our students graduate having participated in 1 or more live client clinic So we're proud about what we teach you about theory and doctrine, but we also give you the opportunity to put it into practice in ways that teach you and allow you to serve the community. In the past 4 years, our students have won more than a dozen national awards in moot court and other national competitions. So for example, our teams have won the best brief in the nation in the National Moot Court Competition, in the National Environmental Law Moot Court Competition, in the National Energy Law Moot Court Competition, and the National Constitutional Law Moot Court Competition. And we were national champions 2 years ago in the bankruptcy negotiation competition. Next week, our international moot court team, the Jessup moot court team, is going to the World Championships in Washington, D.C., competing against teams from all over the world. We've got other teams going to national championship competitions around the world as well. So I hope these are some factors that'll make you consider us very strongly. I want to give my colleagues some time to give their perspectives as well. So let me introduce them and then turn it over to them. First, on my immediate left is Lincoln Davies. They are going to spend some time introducing themselves, but they're shy, and they're not going to talk about some of their greatest accomplishments. So I'm going to say just a couple of things about them. Professor Davies teaches civil procedure, energy law, environmental law, administrative law. He's also our James I. Farr Chair in Law and a university presidential scholar. Chosen by President Pershing for his scholarship. So he's what we call in the game a triple threat. He's a basketball player, so he thinks I mean points and assists and rebounds, but I really mean teaching scholarship and service to the university. To his left is Chris Peterson, who teaches consumer law, contracts, and commercial law. For the past few years, he has also been working with the National Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, implementing some of the nation's most important laws and regulations on payday loan protection and consumer protection. He'll be embarrassed by this, but he's got all sorts of prestigious awards. The most recent is that the Secretary of Defense gave him the Award for Excellence, which, as I understand it, is the highest award given to a civilian by the military in this country, and it's for the regulations he's been working on to protect our military personnel from payday loan fraud and abuse. So very, very significant work that he's doing. Finally, Cliff Roski, who teaches constitutional law, family law, and criminal law. He's a two-time winner of the most prestigious award in the country, the Duke Minier Award for legal scholarship in the area of sexual orientation. He's been on the board and the chair of the board of Equality Utah, and prominent not just locally but nationally in the litigation about marriage equality, and Utah's very, very famous new statute balancing civil liberties and equality in the state. So with that, I'm going to ask each member of the panel to give 5 or 6 minutes of background about themselves, talk a bit about their current scholarship and teaching, to discuss some aspects of the curriculum and current programs that they're working on, and then I will open it up for questions and facilitate that discussion. So let's begin with Dean Davies.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Welcome. So my name is Lincoln Davies, as Dean Adler mentioned, and I think, one thing sort of unique about me, although at least in terms of our faculty, although on this panel maybe it's not so unique because Professor Peterson and I share this. I'm a native of Utah. I was born and raised here. I had a good friend in law school who said he was from Virginia, and he said you can't be a true Virginian unless you were born, raised, and conceived there. I've never asked my parents that question. I'm not going to, but I consider myself a native Utahn, and my father and my father-in-law are both alums of this school, but I am not, and I often wonder as I teach here whether maybe I made a mistake not coming here for law school, because I think, one thing about this place is it really is a true community, and the education that we provide is absolutely amazing. I've had the privilege to watch a lot of my colleagues teach, and I often sit in their classrooms and think, boy, I wish I would have had them for my, whatever constitutional law class, business organizations class in law school, because I think the level of instruction that my colleagues provide is just really tremendous, and reflective, I think, of the faculty's dedication to our students. So, I left for a long time. I went to school in Michigan and then California, and then I worked in DC for about 6 or 7 years, practicing for a big international law firm there, and had a really good time. And I kind of thought, okay, I'm done with Utah. It's okay, it's there. I'll come back to see my family every once in a while, but I'm moving on. And for a year, I clerked here on the Utah Supreme Court. I worked for a judge, helping him with his decisions and cases. And in that year, I kind of had an awakening because, I decided, my mother always said I ran away when I went to college. I would call her every Sunday. That was the deal. I could go out of state for college if I would call my mother every Sunday. So I would call her, and we'd have a nice conversation, and we'd talk about how things were going here in Utah and there in Ann Arbor, and then at the end of the conversation, every time she would say, "Now you ran away, right?" And I'd say, "No, I didn't run away, Mom. I just I went to college. Lots of kids go to college. I kind of ran away." So I came here though for a year to clerk, thinking I'll spend a year with the family. I just had a little baby. My mom can spend time with her grandchild. And this thing happened where spending a year here, I realized, this is a pretty good place to live. There's good Mexican food. The West is beautiful. And, as I really loved living in D.C., loved, practicing law in D.C. And as I spent time there, though, I kept kind of thinking of, it's a really nice place to live in Utah. So when I decided to become a professor, I had it in my head that, maybe that could work out, and it did, and I was just thrilled. But I've now been here longer than I was a lawyer, so I think that is a testament to how thrilled I've been to be here because of the uniqueness of this place and the community of this law school. I think for me, we can talk about sort of our curricular programs, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. And I think we're doing a lot of really good things in terms of innovation and improving our curriculum even more than it already was. What Dean Adler said about the strength of our program and how we really do try to integrate theoretical and doctrinal learning with the practical to teach you both how to become a lawyer, but also sort of the context, the broader, intellectual context. That balance, I think, is really something that's amazing about this school, and we're doing a bunch of other things to continue to improve on it. Like we've just adopted a number of certificates in a number of areas that you can earn and that will appear on your transcript in addition to your JD. So in business law and tax, intellectual property, international law, public interest law, criminal law, and I'm forgetting one. What am I forgetting? International? Did I say international? International law. So a bunch of different fields that you can have this. So we're doing a lot of things like that. We're continuing to improve our curriculum. We're adding practice modules that go along with doctrinal classes so you can get some of those specific skills in specific areas. But for me, really, the thing that I think I value most about this institution is the community of it, and that community extends sort of across the students. If you look around and see those students that you might be enrolling with here, they'll be your friends for the rest of your life. They'll be your colleagues for the rest of your life. You'll make those connections here, and you'll start forming your professional network in a real and deep way here. But it's not just among the students, right? It's with the faculty too. I look at what a lot of my colleagues do. Michael Teeter has worked on Supreme Court and other appellate cases with students. Paul Cassell does the same thing. Robin Craig is constantly working with students on directed research projects and nominating students for awards for their writing. Some of us have written papers with students. I've done, I think, 3 or 4 in the last couple of years with students where we work together, we come up with a really good piece of research and it gets published. I think the dedication of our faculty to the students and the true community that really is in this building, to me, is maybe the thing I value most about this place.
Professor Peterson.
Well, thanks for coming out. My name is Chris Peterson. As Dean Adler said, I teach contract law. So if you enroll, you may have to suffer under my questioning next semester. I also teach commercial law or business law classes and consumer protection. And banking law is, I think, one of my areas of expertise. Most of my writing, a couple books and a number of empirical studies and scholarly journals are focused on various incarnations of sketchy lending practices. So I wrote a lot about the subprime mortgage market before the crash that happened in 2007 and 2008. I also have done a bunch of studies about payday loans, which some of you may know what they are. I'm sure some of you probably are not familiar with them. They're really expensive loans that are made to folks that maybe are struggling in their financial lives a little bit. So that's what my research is about. I guess Dean Adler mentioned that I also have a pretty active law practice right now. I guess it's been about 4 years ago, after the financial crisis, Congress passed this statute called the Dodd-Frank Act, and one of the things that it did was create a new federal consumer protection agency, to deal with things like subprime mortgages and credit cards and your problems on your credit reports. Things like that, and that's what I had been writing about. And so, in any event, they recruited me to help set up the enforcement office in that agency, which is the office that goes out and finds banks that maybe have been misleading or lying to their customers, and it's the office that brings enforcement actions, so creates federal investigations and sues banks or other types of financial companies for cheating their customers. So I did that for took a leave of absence from the university for I guess about 3 years. I was on a leave of absence and went and helped set up that agency and ran some of the teams that worked on mortgage loans and payday loans and other types of deposit account products like checking accounts, that agency has now managed to recover about $11 billion from various financial institutions and give it right back to the customers. It doesn't go to Congress or somewhere; it just goes straight into the pockets. So it's likely that some of you in this room have received the proceeds of settlements. About I think it's up to about 40 million American consumers have gotten the proceeds of those kinds of settlements. And after I did that for a while, had been away for a little bit and decided to come back and take advantage of a policy that the university has to have part-time professors. So I've been working, I have 2 jobs, 2 bosses. 50% of my salary is paid here by the university and 50% of it is paid by Uncle Sam. And now I work in the director's office at that agency as an attorney, an advisor. I guess my title is a special advisor, which always kind of makes me feel, is that like special education? What is that? I don't know. But so my client, I have one client, and my client is the director of this consumer protection agency, and I advise him on policy issues with respect to a whole array of issues that come up in the federal government's regulation of the nation's banks, credit unions, and other non-depository lenders and financial service providers. I guess for a piece of time in that, the CFPB, that's the name of this new agency. It's kind of an odd name. People can't ever remember it. But the CFPB loaned me out to the Department of Defense. There's a statute that caps the limit or puts a limit on the price of loans that can be made to our military service members and their families. So it's a special consumer protection statute just dealing with folks in the military. And that's something that I actually helped write or work on when Congress passed that statute when I was a few years back earlier in my career. So I went and worked for the General Counsel's office at the Department of Defense and helped write the regulations that implement that law. That worked out really well. I should correct something. I don't think it's the highest. It was very nice. It's a little bit embarrassing, but I don't want to give any false impressions about it, especially since there are probably some vets in the office. I think to get the highest one, you have to go shoot people and that sort of thing.
I said the
valor.
highest to a civilian.
Well, I think they give. I think
civilians shoot people in the military?
Well, I think that there may be valor related. Anyway, let's not belabor this.
Suffice it to say that Professor Peterson is super fancy, even though he might have lost a round to my wife in high school debate. Just maybe.
Allegedly, I don't remember that. Anyway, yeah. So I telecommute back and forth to Washington, and go back and forth to DC. Maybe once or twice a month, depending on how busy I am. But I also teach and juggle a lot of stuff, and I would just be delighted to have you come and take my class and try and teach you about practicing law and also about some of the great issues of our time, some of the most important issues that determine the welfare and well-being of America and what is going to happen to our national economy. It's nice to get to, there's this old saying that I'm sure you've heard it as well, that people who can't teach. I went into being a law professor pretty early in my career because that's what I thought I really wanted to do, but I always felt a little bit haunted that maybe I did that because I couldn't be a real lawyer. It turns out I think I can feel at this stage in my career that is not, in fact, true. I'm actually have an active and high-level law practice for the United States, and I think teach you also about how to do that and how to do a good job of it. And I think I have some insights about that. And I guess there's nothing in my life, any professional activity. In fact, I'm not sure I can think of any legal activity or any activity that's appropriate to discuss in this forum that I enjoy more, frankly, that I get more satisfaction out of. I turned a really noble sentiment into something tawdry there, didn't I? Look, my point is that there's nothing that I feel better about and have more satisfaction in my life than teaching a good class or, getting together with a student or somebody that I'm helping mentor along. And I oftentimes don't even notice that that's happening, but at the end of the day, when I look back at my life, what did I do today? Did I enjoy that? What did I enjoy? Was it, and I look back, and oftentimes for me, the highlight of it is actually having interaction where I, provide some nurturing or something useful to people with no expectation of reward or return. That's a beautiful and noble thing. And for me, it's one of the great honors of my life to actually get to teach some talented young students that are, talented students that are going to go on and become our state senators, the judges of this state, of my home state as well. Are you going to be fancy law partners? You're going to go out and be legal aid lawyers and protect the poor. You're going to be folks that protect our communities from criminals. Put the folks that are out there victimizing folks in cages where they can't hurt us anymore, or make sure that the people that are about to be put in cages are actually the ones that belong and go, actually should be going there. They're not innocent. In my view, I could have a lot of things I could have done with my life, but being an attorney is a noble cause. It is in service to the highest ideals of justice. If you come and take our classes, if you can come to our university, we're going to do right by you. We have the smallest, if not the smallest, student-teacher ratio for a public school in the country. We've got to be close. I think it's the best faculty student ratio for a public school in the country. There are some of the very the schools with gigantic endowments back east and on the coast that probably have a few more professors per student than we do. But what I suspect about those schools is that those faculty are not as dedicated to teaching and mentoring students as we are. I actually believe it is likely true that we have the most sort of deployed mentoring and teaching resources per student of any university in the country. And it reflects our philosophy about what kind of an institution we want to be. Balanced, healthy, providing the highest quality instruction to our students. So I hope that you'll come and join us. I hope you take my contract law class. I hope you'll take business law classes from me, and feel free to stop by my office anytime.
Hi, everyone, and thanks very much for coming out, and hi to you out there. I'm Cliff, and I teach 3 classes at the law school. I teach one first-year class, one second-year class, and one second or usually third-year class. So the first-year class is criminal law, and you get that in the spring. And then I teach one of our constitutional law classes that focuses on free speech and equality issues, civil rights. And then I also teach a seminar called Sexuality, Gender, and Law that focuses on women's rights and LGBT rights. And I want to build on some of the comments you got from both of my colleagues. First, about I'm the non-native on the panel, apparently. And so, but I have a similar story to tell. So I have lived in Boston, New York City, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, and Seattle. And I am thrilled to live in Salt Lake City. I do not plan to go anywhere. I love it here. I love it more than all those other places. Those are great places to visit, but I'm very happy to live here. It's very funny, when I first moved here, I had other options of other schools to go to, and I chose to move to Salt Lake City. And people would say, "Where are you moving from?" And I say, "San Francisco." And they say, "I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "What? Why are you? This place is amazing." So I think, for those of you who are considering moving here, a common experience, actually Lincoln's experience is quite common. I have students who grew up in Utah and say, "I have to get out." And then within 3 years, they move back. So we get them the job in New York or DC or San Francisco. And I say, "Hey, welcome back. What's up?" And they say, "Well, DC was really fun, but do you know how long you have to drive to see a mountain in that place and go climbing or hiking or something like that?" And I do, actually, yes. And so the access to wilderness and the access to downtown and the access to the Capitol. If you're going to go to law school and you want to get involved in politics or government, being right next to the state Capitol, being the state school, there's a sort of channel that gets you into law and politics here really easily. Just a quick word about the stuff that I do. You've heard already. So as Dean Adler said, we have 3 responsibilities. Teaching, of course, first. And then also we do research, scholarship. We become experts in a particular subject. My subject is LGBT rights, so I've written articles on marriage and employment discrimination, and particularly LGBT youth and sort of issues they face in schools and in custody and visitation cases, things like that. But then we also have service, public service, and we can do that in many different ways. As you can hear, Professor Peterson's been very active on the service front. I have gotten involved with this organization, Equality Utah, which is the state's leading LGBT rights organization. But interestingly, I've also worked directly with the leadership of the LDS Church on those issues. And so over the years, been very active in trying to craft state and local legislation to protect LGBT people that we can also win the support of the LDS Church and the Utah legislature, which is, of course, one of the most Republican conservative legislatures in the country. So it's been a real fascinating challenge for me. Also meaningful on a personal level because all of my in-laws are LDS, even though I'm not. So it's been a sort of a fascinating experience. And because that situation is so unusual for the LGBT movement, most of the gains of the movement have been in places like San Francisco and New York and Boston. It's drawn the attention of the national movement and the national press. So there's been a lot of interesting sort of contact. So the Utah case at some point went up to the Supreme Court, and this was the anti-discrimination law that we passed last year. I helped write and pass. That was a law that says you can't be fired from your job or evicted from your home just because you're gay or transgender. That's the first time that a Republican-controlled state has ever passed a pro-LGBT law of any kind in history. So that was like very sort of interesting. You had to be very creative as a lawyer. And this is the last point I want to make is we bring this stuff into our classrooms. So I was teaching a class called Sexuality, Gender, and Law while I was writing this law and getting it passed. So what did we do? One day we spent looking at the bill and walking through each passage and figuring out, why did we write this way? What does it mean? It's actually really hard to even understand. When two sides who sort of disagree on a lot of things write a law, it's very hard to figure out what's going on in that law. So we walked through that. We had this real experience, which I think is quite unusual about how a law was drafted. There was another day where we spent at one point the church held a press conference and made an announcement about what kind of law it would like to see. And as someone working with Equality Utah, we had to hold our press conference responding to that press conference. This is a very interesting thing because the lawyers end up doing a lot of work, social activism, politics, and they have to craft what they call talking points, right? really boiled down statements that you want to make to the public. And so we actually divided up the group into, imagine you worked for Equality Utah, how would you respond to the church's statement? Okay, now imagine that you worked for a conservative think tank like the Sutherland Institute, how would you respond? And then boiling down your responses into not legalese, but actual talking points that you would want to see appear in a press article. So that was a really interesting exercise. This year I drafted a hate crimes law that was, it got, I think it lost by, I think it was 4 votes in the Senate floor. And so in teaching criminal law, a hate crimes law is a criminal law. So we had spent a day looking at all of the different passages. In my criminal law class. So students are involved in this, but not just in the classroom. Whenever I do any drafting, I do a lot of research to support the drafting, and we have, all of us have students working for us as research assistants, and so many of the passages in these bills that we're writing, our students are helping us write them, and whenever I'm writing talking points, I had a senator ask me a fascinating question, which is, if a hate crime could be a crime based on gender or sex of the victim, why isn't every rape a hate crime? Really hard, interesting question, and I had Kyler O'Brien, my research assistant, look into it, doing cutting-edge research, which then becomes the talking points for the senator and part of the conversation around the bill. So at every step of the way, now Paul Cassell and Michael Teeter have very famously had their students writing amicus briefs that get submitted to the Supreme Court. So students are that's why we do the service, because it helps us with the teaching and it helps you get the real skills that you'll need, however you want to use your law degree.
Thank you very much. The first thing you need to learn about law school is not to be shy. Not to be shy about asking questions and participating. So it's your turn. What questions do you have? Very good. Thank you. In the back. So the question is, how often do faculty tie in current affairs and what's going on in the real world into the classroom?
Just all the time, whenever possible, and it's always possible. That's one of the interesting things. What's a more cutting-edge issue than sort of the national economy and the question of, he's got a brand new federal agency he helped create, writing new regulations this week. Just yesterday, I was reading the paper, and 2 things happened that were utterly relevant to my classes and my students. I have a student who's writing a paper on whether or not it's constitutional to basically say that a person who's transgender has to use the bathroom that's on their birth certificate, because South Dakota passed a law out of the legislature and then the governor vetoed that law. And then yesterday, as she's writing the paper, North Carolina passed the law and the governor signed it. It's now law in North Carolina. So she's writing a paper, right, in a seminar. The seminar is about writing the paper, and she's writing on a totally current event. Her paper was due today, and the law passed yesterday. It's a little stressful for her, right? And obviously, I'll give her the time she needs to incorporate it. But that's just one example. But I think whenever we possibly can, we bring current events into our classrooms.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and I think that so, and it's not that I'm not interested in the theories of law and whatnot. And earlier in my life, when I had long hair, I had thought I was going to be a philosopher and become a philosophy professor. But I think I ultimately decided that I wasn't that interested in it, because I felt like they just churned on these old questions and they never seemed to make any progress. But I liked the sort of deeper thinking about practical stuff, about stuff that it just seemed like those problems were more interesting. And so somehow I went from wanting to be a philosopher to doing really intricate banking law cases, which are very practically focused, but for whatever reason, it just turned out to be much more interesting to me. And so, yeah, I'd say that like in all of my classes, well, especially my upper division classes, every question is a eminently practical question. think probably in my first year contract class, you kind of need to walk before you run a little bit. Sometimes those cases are a little bit older, and they're sort of more about what the foundations and the basic theory of the law is, so you can sort of start to get the skill set both intellectually to think through legal problems effectively, but also have the sort of background basic notions about the topography of the law, so you can start to engage in it at a more high level. But I honestly think that the first year class, my contract law class, is my favorite one to teach because you come in kind of fresh and you're probably maybe a little more diligent in getting your reading done and preparing for class, which makes it more fun to engage and interact with you. I guess, so in response to your question, probably less current events in my contract law class than, say, consumer protection or commercial law. Maybe a little less current events in commercial law too, but every issue in commercial law is eminently practical and focused on the realities of running a business or a bank. So yeah, hopefully that's a good answer. But I don't want. I'm reluctant to give it to you because I don't want you to think that the contract law class would not be interesting. I actually think it's maybe the most interesting, and it provides the foundation that you need to actually, not just read the news, but to go out and make the news.
Yeah, so I'd make 3 points. I think, first of all, both my colleagues are right. We use current events all the time in class. It will depend a little bit on the class. The second point, I'll just give you a couple of examples. So in my civil procedure class, which is a first semester class you all would take, we, a year or two ago, the class is about the sort of rules for lawsuits, right? And we study primarily the federal rules because they're the basis for most states, and they translate the most, and they apply across the nation in all U.S. courts. So we're studying that, and one of the rules deals with sort of how you get information out of the other side. It's called discovery. And as we're doing this, I'm also on the Utah Supreme Court's committee that advises the court on the Utah rules of civil procedure. And Utah was going through this huge change in how they do these discovery rules, which overhauled the entire system for litigation in Utah. So as we're doing that, we're talking about, how might Utah change its rules? How would that change? What would the impacts be? Why would you do this? Why not? What might be the best design? And we're doing this as the committee is, making suggestions to the Supreme Court for how to change the rules. And the thing is, now that Utah has done that, now the federal system has changed its rules in part in response to what Utah did. So we're talking about that in class, right? In my energy law class, we did something similar to what Professor Roski was talking about. One of the things we study are these laws called renewable portfolio standards, which are as sexy as they sound. But they're requirements that electric utilities in different states produce a certain percentage of their electricity from renewable energy. And so as we're in class, Utah adopts a statute. So we pull this, the statute down and we analyze it and compare it to other states and look at it and sort of, point out some of the loopholes and differences with Utah's statute as it's being signed into law by Governor Herbert. And then I guess that also extends into sort of research, right? So I mentioned that sometimes faculty will do research with students. The third-year student I am working with right now, the 2 papers that we're writing together, one is on the role of natural gas in the Clean Power Plan, which is the Obama administration's rulemaking that has been stayed temporarily now by the Supreme Court, but it's hot off the presses last fall, and we're talking about what the implications of that might be. And the other paper we're working on is looking at what electric utilities in the West do with their water resources. And this is an issue that is pressing today as climate change is affecting how water is going to be available in the West. And then the third point is just that even though in some classes you'll read really old cases. Some moldy old case from the 1800s on contract law, or something from the dawn of.
None of the cases I teach have any mold. Just
you see a little bit of competition here. CivPro is much better than contracts. Or a case from sort of the dawn of our nation in constitutional law, or you read a case in civil procedure that's 60 years old and has been the law for 6 decades, and then all of a sudden the Supreme Court hands down a new decision, and you've got to deal with it, and you all have to learn it, and you're probably going to know it better than people who've been out there practicing for 20 years because you're learning it right then and you're talking about the implications of it. And I've seen that happen. And that's part of, I think, what's exciting about law. And for me, why I don't want to be a philosopher is because law really is sort of it's not just the fabric of society, but it's one of the key parts of our infrastructure that makes our society work and function. And you learn about that on a daily basis and how it's changing.
Round two.
I realized that I had the best example and I had held back. So two thoughts come to mind. One is, so there's a famous old case about whether or not it was constitutional to send Japanese Americans into internment camps because it was afraid the military was afraid that they would be disloyal. So I teach that case, and of course it seems like a foreign country, right? The idea that 100,000 people were put in camps in the United States. So immediately then ask the question about, well, what about racial or religious profiling done by the TSA at airports? Would that be constitutional? So you always want to bring it back to the present moment and show the relevance of it. But I just realized as we're sitting here that last summer, the Supreme Court famously held that same-sex couples have the right to marry in all 50 states. What did I do in the fall in constitutional law? We did a mock appeal where two students got up on this stage and represented each side of that as if we were, we decided it would be more interesting if we were an intermediate appeals court, but all of the students were judges in panels of three. So you were 3-judge courts sitting there listening to your classmates make the argument, and then we broke out and you had your judicial deliberations and you had to write an opinion in an hour resolving the matter with like 5 questions to answer, and then we all came back into the classroom and met as groups, and it happened to be a beautiful day, so you got to do your deliberations out on this deck wherever you wanted. So just a classic example of bringing a current event into the classroom.
And because this appears to be a competition, I'll give you 2 examples as well. Lincoln allowed me to get back in the classroom this semester. I'm teaching water law. And the very week that the Utah Supreme Court was hearing an oral argument about the public trust doctrine, which asks what obligation the state has to protect sovereign resources, the very week we were studying the public trust doctrine. So I had our students sit in on a moot court that one side in the case was doing about the case, and then invited them to go down and hear the argument. The very next week, the Supreme Court stayed a different case about stream access, which is whether you as a fisherman or fisherwoman can walk down a stream that's through private property. And I brought in the attorney who represented the Utah Stream Access Coalition to talk about that case. So we talked about being small earlier. One of the benefits is that we know all of the attorneys downtown who are working on these really hot cases. And when something comes up in current events, we can not only talk about them ourselves in class, but we can give you access to the people who are kind of on the front lines about that. So, other questions? Yes?
Yeah, you talked about using...
Yeah, so we have a couple different programs. Faculty have their own sort of pool of resources, then they can hire students sort of on an ad hoc basis. They get to know somebody in a class and they might do it that way. And then we have a formal program called the Quinney Fellow Program, where students after their first year or sort of the end of the first year will apply to be a research fellow for a faculty member, and there's a process where students and faculty get matched. And that fellowship program comes with a partial tuition waiver, some other benefits, and I think for me, at least from having done this every year, I've been here with a student, the real benefit is you really get to know the faculty member, right? And you develop that relationship. And I still talk to a lot of my Quinney fellows that I've had in the past. And that's often where, I'll really find out how good they are. And, that's where I develop a relationship where sometimes we'll write something together, right? And we get that published and both of our names are on it. And also it's an opportunity, to work with faculty in a way that also can lead to jobs. So I have employers calling me. I had an employer call me yesterday. What can you tell me about this student? We're looking at them. We might hire them. I've had a number of students get jobs, very prestigious jobs with judges, in part because I've known the student, because I've worked with them, because I've done research with them. One of the 2Ls that I am doing research with, she just got a job with Justice Lee on the Utah Supreme Court, and he often will then send his clerks to other chambers that might lead ultimately to the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. One of my students that I've been doing research with is going to be clerking for the Federal Circuit, which is an appellate court in Washington, D.C. that handles patent appeals, and she wants to do patent work. Really, really prestigious job, which, I was able to write a letter for her that said, this person is, far and above the person you should hire in the country because of the research we've done together.
We have the question, which I forgot to repeat, was how we select our research assistants. We have also, I think it's fair to say, expanded pretty significantly the number of students who serve as fellows or research assistants in recent years, which is a win-win. It helps us as researchers and it helps you as students. Other questions? Yes. So the question was a preliminary understanding that the first year of law school is both theoretical and challenging, stressful. And so number one, what teaching tools do we use to try to get across those concepts, and what practical study skills do we recommend for first year students?
I'm really glad you asked this question, because that was something I was getting long-winded and I had forgotten to talk about this. But it's something that I put a lot of thought and effort into. So in terms of teaching techniques, as many as possible, and I actually think that coming into a new building has sort of inspired me to innovate in my teaching methods. And so, we ask questions, like the old school asking of questions, although in recent years I've been persuaded, we have a teaching expert, a teaching innovation expert on staff here, and he's been persuaded me that asking you about the facts of the case, that's the traditional sort of way you warm students up in the classroom, is it's a waste of time, because you know the facts and you're sort of embarrassed to raise your hand and say something that everybody knows the answer to. And so I now just say the facts, and then we skip straight to the analysis of the case, and those are the kinds of questions I tend to ask. And one of the traditional flaws in legal education is if you ask one student one question, you're not engaging the whole classroom. So what I've started doing is I'll take a problem and I'll say, okay, now either pair up or triple up into groups, and everyone works through the problem together, and I float around the classroom teaching each group as I go around. That does a lot of different things at once. First of all, it engages all of you. You can't be on Facebook during this exercise, right? You actually have to engage the problem, but also it teaches you to work with each other. Some of you are less comfortable with the public speaking role and more comfortable talking to each other, so it warms you up to that. Lawyers work in groups. There's conference calls all the time and negotiations and things like that. And so that's a certain teaching model. The other thing I've worked very hard on is a very common experience in the first year is you learn this framework, you learn the doctrine, but when you come to the exam, you have difficulty expressing yourself in words, in writing that's clear. And we can often see this in many of the first year exams. It's like, I think this person gets it, but they're not putting it on the page. So in criminal laws in the second semester of the first year, and the offer that I've made to students, and many have taken me up on it, is I'll give you a practice exam, you'll write it, we'll meet as a group in class, we'll discuss the practice exam, and then after that, you will delete it, and you will take it again based on our classroom discussion, email it to me. I spend an hour marking it up, and then you come in, and for a half hour, we walk through every word of that practice exam, and then you do it again, and again, and again, with the same answer until it's perfect, and you know what perfect looks like, and then you move to a new problem. I've seen massive differences. The first year I did this, I would say that everyone in the class would have gotten a B+, an A- or an A in my old classes because their writing improved so much. And that's some of the stuff that I've done to sort of teaching techniques, but also I have had one student who asked me, how do you prepare for class? And we worked on that together. And then when other students asked me that question, I actually have them call him because his class preparation took such a leap forward. But that's more student dependent. What works for you in getting ready for class is going to vary more from one student to another.
My tip speaks to both your comment about the first year being painful and also about you know, the thing that I think can make students most effective. I think that it's critical the way that you emotionally approach the whole project. If you think about your first year of law school as being a series of tasks to sort of check off, it's going to be a lot of boxes on the list and a lot of checks to put on there, and it's going to feel like work. I hope that you would try to come into it retaining a sense of intellectual curiosity and fascination about it, and that's easier for folks that are really honestly interested in the law. I could say that, you know, back years ago, my first year of law school stands out in my mind as wonderful. I loved the first year of law school. In fact,
he went here.
I did, yeah. Well, I'm a local kid, and you know, my dad worked at the university. My grandfather taught here. My great grandfather was a professor here. My great grandfather's brother was a professor here. It just didn't. Yeah, I could have went to fancier schools, I'm sure, but I actually think, you know, and they're not that fancy. I'm not interested in that school.
My point is that he loved his first year and he went here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I want to know what you mean by a fancier school. We are a fancy school.
Well, I mean, what people say are fancier.
I've been to a lot of law school buildings in the country. I haven't seen a fancier one than this one.
That's right. Well, anyway, I guess my point is that I think that the first year of law school can actually just be a wonderfully transformative intellectual experience where you know, you have this chance to just learn a whole new way of thinking and the foundations of a whole new career, and that it actually can just be marvelous. But you probably got to be willing to focus and put some effort into it because it's going to be rigorous. So my advice, my tip is to try and look at each of those cases that are going to come through your books or across your desk as what they were for the people that were in that situation. Each of those cases, these lawsuits were these, in the lives of the people and the companies involved in them were these titanic struggles where the pageantry and drama of life was unfolding, and you get this little window into it and into the deployment of law, of the government's resources to try and assist in resolving the struggles of humanity, right? That this is, to me, it's like reality TV on steroids. It's reality TV that mattered to people in a profound way, that were real people, that were not performing some sort of kabuki show for your entertainment, but were actually, you know, fighting to try and resolve the disputes that they had at the time. There are a lot of lawyer jokes out there. The first thing we do is kill all the lawyers. And then what happens? What countries have no lawyers? Somalia. A country that's government systems have broken down, that has chaos, right? That law is the thing that separates us from dictatorships, from the raw exercise of power. And the cases that you study in your first year of law school are the pageants that evolved in the drama of the deployment of those principles. So my advice, try and stay curious about it and see each of those opportunities as actually, you know, a little mini entertainment system for you to learn and be fascinated. And it may not feel like work as much. And it doesn't to me. Like, I still don't really feel like when I teach, I mean, maybe once in a while it feels like teaching. Grading exams feels like work, but teaching doesn't really feel like that to me. It's never really felt like work.
So it's a really, really great question. I'm going to try to answer it quickly, but also add a little bit to what my colleagues have said. I think what we do to try to help you learn this material is going to depend a little bit from professor to professor. It's going to change. But I think, if you have sort of in your head this idea of like the old Paper Chase movie, if you've watched that, if you haven't, don't. Or, Legally Blonde, right? Like, Reese Witherspoon in the classroom, and it's this terrifying experience. What you have here in our school is very, very different from that. It's sort of the polar opposite, right? So Professor Roski talked about some of the techniques he uses. I'll just mention a few of the ones that I use. So I use video clips and I have slides, and it's not a straight Socratic method. I will ask questions. I will try to get students to really think through the cases, but I'll also do some lecturing. And we do pragmatic exercises in my civil procedure class. So I have you write legal documents. In the first week or two of law school, right? You're writing things that would get filed in court. We use a real case. It's sort of a funny case. It's a case where this cat bit the neighbor, and the neighbor sues them for over $100,000. It's a real case, and we have documents from the case, and we look at them. I have you write discovery for that case, and I have you go to court. But I think all of my colleagues do different things like that to really make it concrete and really do this thing we're talking about where you blend, the theory and the law with how you actually use it in the real world. And just sort of an example, Professor Teeter teaches first-year classes. He won one of these really prestigious awards that basically says you're a rock star in teaching at this university last year. And if you come here in your second semester, you'll take constitutional law next year from one of two people, Professor Teeter or the #1 star that we just hired away from BYU, Brunel Anderson Jones, who clerked for Justice O'Connor on the U.S. Supreme Court. So you're going to get one of those two people teaching you constitutional law. That's pretty awesome. So that's sort of the first part of your question. As to the second, I think there are a lot of things you can do, and I'll give you sort of like maybe 3 or 4, right? So one thing I would say is reorient yourself and understand coming in that law school is not like other kinds of learning. It's not like a master's degree program. It's not like a bachelor's program. You're not just going to learn knowledge. You have to learn how to use that knowledge. And so the first step is getting the knowledge, but the real important part is now putting it in play, learning how to do analysis, how to apply it to different fact situations you've never seen. So in law school, as much as we're teaching the law, even more we're teaching you how to think about the law and how to use it. And you have to reorient yourself. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is you will have to work hard. It's first year is rigorous, but everyone that tries hard gets through. It's not like when my father-in-law, who's ancient and old now, went to law school where they literally said to him, look to your left, look to your right, one of you will be gone. It's not like that. Everyone makes it through, but you've got to put in the work. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, just keep things in context in terms of what you're learning. So, you can read and read and read and read in law school, but that's not what you want to do. You want to read, you want to digest it, you want to figure out what you've learned, and then you want to put it to practice. So you want to do practice exams. You want to talk through how to do this analysis. And you want to take advantage of the fact that we have a faculty that really cares about you and that has time and will make time to meet with you individually. So I would do that too. Meet with your faculty, take advantage of that opportunity. And then the last thing is I would say keep law school in perspective. It's fun, it's engaging, it's rigorous, it's important, but it's part of your life. It's not your whole life. And so if you like running, keep running. If you like movies, keep going to movies. If you have friends you hang out with every Friday night, do that. If you have little kids and you want to spend time with them, make that time and spend time with them. You got to find balance.
So I want to mention 2 things about skills in the first year. And one of the things you learn as a lawyer is if you disagree with the premise of a question, make sure that you don't just answer the question, you also address the premise. So the premise that we only teach theory in the first year is not correct. And you've heard some examples of that. 2 other important ways. One is that we have, I think, the best legal methods program in the country, or one of the few best. We don't just teach legal writing and research. They also teach client interviewing and counseling. They teach negotiation skills. So we begin to inculcate you to those aspects of being a lawyer in the very first year. Second, if you want live client representation, you can do so beginning in your second semester of law school through our pro bono initiative. And it's something we really encourage you to do. Number one, because you get the sense of representing clients very early. Number two, because of what these three fine faculty members have been talking about service. We as lawyers are servants. If you start doing pro bono work in your second semester of law school, we are convinced that you will do so throughout your career, and that will make you more rewarded and more successful as a lawyer. There was another question over here, I think. No? Yes. Yes, sir.
Earlier, opportunities students have research with faculty. Process to that, or
How do we match students to faculty for research positions?
Right. So I mentioned sort of the ad hoc version where a faculty member might hire somebody, and that really is ad hoc. It's sort of, a faculty member reaches out, maybe you contact them, and you can do that for pay, or sometimes students will do it for as directed research credit too. So there's some flexibility there. In terms of the formal fellow program, there is a formal application process that students go through at the end of their first year, or if they're a second year rising to be a third year, they can do it then as well. And the faculty also have to fill out an application. And so there's a committee that reviews all of those applications and chooses the students. And it's a committee of faculty that include the research dean and the dean of students, Barbara Dickey, as well as one of the first year legal writing and methods professors. And on those applications, students and faculty can say they would like to be matched with each other, in which case they usually are, or if they don't really have a preference, then the committee will match them usually by subject area. So if you really want to work on, payday lending, and you might get matched with Professor Peters. And if you really want to work on, international citizenship and corporate governance, you might get matched with Professor Erica George.
Can I add to that too? I mean, there are also opportunities to just do research that are not tied to the fellowship, the Quinney Fellowship. And my advice would be, if you want to do research with a professor, just go ask them, can I be your research assistant? And I know that if somebody approaches me about that, then they're sort of self-selecting themselves to be somebody that wants to actually work hard and work on something together. And I'm open to, writing papers together, co-publishing them, or just having a series of discrete research assignments. And I have a budget that, we have limited budgets to do that sort of thing. And different professors are in different spots about that. Obviously, the answer may be, well, maybe not this year, maybe next semester, or I already hired somebody. But just don't be shy about it. Like, that's not an unusual thing. And the other thing too is, I think that I suspect that you'll find, like, as your careers go on, there are going to be so many opportunities for interesting activities here that the challenge is going to be being disciplined about not putting too many wonderful things on your plate, because there are so many opportunities to do service, to get involved, to litigate cases, to do just this building is chock full of really cool stuff to do. I actually find that it's a little bit hard to get somebody to want to be a research assistant because they have so many other really exciting things to do, like, be on the moot court competition and go to Zurich or something like that. Or you could help me write my law review article. So if you want to be my research assistant, just ask.
That is not a promise that you get to go to Zurich, by the way. Just, fair disclosure. Did you have anything else to add on that,
No,
Cliff? Okay. What other questions do you have? Yes.
As someone from out of state, how is your job placement in? How is your job placement?
So it's funny, I particularly this year.
The question was, how is your job placement out of Utah? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is a subject that I've become very interested in this year. I've been more active in the last couple of years in getting students jobs, very specific, like you need a job, I want to get you a job, let's talk about what your dream job is. I think one of the nice things, I think we have mixed emotions that even though on this panel 2 people are natives, that's not representative of the faculty as a whole. The faculty as a whole is often recruited in from other states and cities and states. But in response to your question, that's actually a huge advantage. So for example, I have a student who grew up in Arkansas, came here for law school, and he wants to go to a big city. And so he's got 3 professors that he's worked closely with, me, Michael Teeter, and Jeff Schwartz. And the good news is none of us are from Utah. We all practice law in big cities elsewhere. And so what are we doing? We're pitching to the people that we know in these cities. And I was pleasantly surprised. It's been 10 years more, really, since I practiced law, and I still have a ton of contacts in San Francisco, and that's a real attraction to him. I have a ton of contacts in New York City. Great attraction. We're just starting the process with him, so I can't tell you what ends up happening with him. Although I actually am quite confident that he could go to New York City if he wants to. And then one person who I just placed, the person who argued for the state in the same-sex marriage case, I just wrote a letter to a judge in Cheyenne, so it's a federal appeals court, one step away from the Supreme Court, the 10th Circuit. She just got a clerkship with the 10th Circuit in Cheyenne. She wanted that job because her boyfriend had his dream job in Denver, and if you do a 10th Circuit clerkship in Cheyenne, you can get a job in Denver. She's done. She's taken care of. That's just a couple of examples, but I think the sort of geographical diversity of the faculty is a real asset in terms of placing students in other states.
Let me just add to that sort of briefly. To be honest, the real issue we have is that students come here and then decide they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
And what we're actually very interested in trying to get students to go more places. And whenever we have students that want to go somewhere else, in my experience, we've always placed them there. So I can think of just sort of off the top of my head, I had a student who wanted to go to Vegas. We got him a job in Vegas. I've had a couple of students. I had a student who wanted to go back to Arkansas, but got him a job in Arkansas. I have a student right now who's a third year who's from Hawaii, and he wanted to go somewhere else in the West. He has one job lined up for a judge in New Mexico right after graduation, and then another one he just got. The judge called me to go to Texas. So in general, if you want to go somewhere else, we will help you do it, and we can do it. And the 2 things I would say about that is, first of all, Dean Adler won't toot his own horn, but he is out hitting the pavement talking to our alumni and knows alumni in every state pretty much, that if you want a job there, he will help connect you to them. And the second thing is that our faculty, again, because of our size, we're able to spend time with you and to help you with this, and we will. And so we will put in that extra effort. We will make the call. We'll help you make that connection. I was just in D.C. last week where I practiced for a conference at GW where I was speaking, and I had lunch with some of the people from my firm, and they said, "Do you have good students? We'd like to hire them. Send them to us."
Yeah, I want to add on the alumni. We've got alumni not only all over the country, but all over the world. Partners in major law firms in London and Hong Kong, around the world. I mentioned our Jessup International team. They're in DC next week. A dozen of our alumni are hosting a reception for them to encourage them, but also to network them in Washington, DC. We are forming alumni chapters in New York, DC, Los Angeles, the Bay Area, Phoenix, Tucson, Southern Arizona, Las Vegas. A lot of the primary markets around the country where you might want to have a job, we have alumni.
And just one last example. I was in Korea last summer for 2 weeks, going to a couple of conferences. I had lunch with 3 of our alums in Seoul.
What else can we help you with? Yes. More information about the certificate program.
Yeah, so this was something we've been working on for about 1.5 years. The law school has approved them. The university has approved them, so they're almost fully approved. They got to get rubber stamped by a couple of other groups really quickly. And the idea of the certificates is sort of twofold, right? One is to help you kind of map your curriculum within the JD generally, because the JD is sort of a broad degree. You may not want to do that, right? You might want to have a very broad degree, and that's totally fine. But these will help give you some guidance if you really want to be, a business lawyer, you really want to be a criminal lawyer. These will help you sort of shape what your curriculum looks like in that respect. The other thing is that we were involved with the Utah Bar, which is the licensing group for the state. During last summer, they did a big survey of about 1,000 employers in the state. And that data showed that one of the things employers in this state value really heavily is specialization during law school in an area. So the certificates are designed in that way to try to help you get jobs and to show if you want to specialize in a certain area that you really do have an emphasis in that area. And what employers have told us sort of anecdotally is that when they look at applicants, if there's somebody that they're trying to hire somebody in intellectual property, for instance, if they have something that shows them that they like a certificate, that they really are interested and invested in that area, they move to the top of the pile. Doesn't mean they necessarily hire them, right? But it means they get the interview, and that's the hardest part a lot of the time. So the certificates are designed to allow you to do this in a bunch of different areas: intellectual property, international law, criminal law, environmental law, public interest law, business and tax. I feel like what? Oh, litigation and dispute resolution. That's the other one I keep forgetting. So there's 7 of them that you can get. They cover pretty much every area that you could possibly practice in, and you have to get 17 credits to meet any of them, which is within the 88 credits you'd need to graduate. So it's fairly easy to do that. In general, you take sort of basic classes. So if you're doing the business certificate, you take business law, commercial law, tax law, and then you do some specialty courses in that area as well. And then you have to do something specific in each of the certificates that really shows your dedication to the area. So in most of them, it's a seminar paper on that topic in the broad area of, say, business law or intellectual property law. For a couple of them, it's a clinical experience, which is true for the litigation certificate and for the criminal certificate.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. So the question for those out on the internet is about the bar exam and what we help people do to prepare for it, and then also how the Utah Bar translates. So let me take the last question first, and then I'll sort of streamline into what we help people do to prepare. So traditionally, the way it worked was every state had their own bar, and you had to take that state's bar. So when I took the bar, I took the Utah Bar, and the only state really you could waive into was DC. So then I waived into DC, and I have 2 licenses. There's been a movement in the last several years that a lot of states have moved to a multi-state bar exam. And then generally, the states that have that, you can take that exam in any one of those states and then pass, although the states score them differently. So that's sort of how the bar works. This is an exam, for those of you who aren't familiar, that you take after you've graduated. You have to have a JD in general to take this exam. Certainly in Utah, there's a couple states where you don't, but the path to get there without a JD is very difficult. And you have to pass this exam to be able to practice law. So it's sort of like the last hurrah and the last fun part of law school, right? Or maybe the most stressful part. So what do we do to help students get ready for this? We do a lot of things. I think you have to sort of pull back and say, the first thing we do is we try to teach you really well, right? We try to teach you really well from the beginning. For instance, when I took the bar exam, I had to learn property law for the bar exam, because I didn't learn any property law in my property law class. I literally learned no property law. We watched a movie from Michael Moore about housing in Detroit or something, and we talked about some case about embryos for a month. I knew nothing about property law. I had to learn it. None of our students, if they do the work during law school, have to learn the subject for the bar. They're refreshing They're maybe getting a little bit of sort of, a little bit deeper on a couple issues here and there. They're seeing the broader context again. They're getting reminded of what they learned. But you learned that material already in law school because that's how we've designed our curriculum. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing we do is we have a bar prep program that you can take when you're about to take the bar exam, that we'll invite some students to, that Professor Richards and Professor Hill run together to help you work on your techniques and your skills to take an exam if you're going to need that extra help. And then the third thing is we're actually heavy in the process right now of expanding the way that we support our students for the bar exam. Dean Adler hasn't mentioned it, but when the grand opening of this building, he announced our 100-100 initiative, which is our goal to get every student who finishes here a job and to pass the bar on the first try. And we're actually pretty close already on the bar exam. We're generally about 90% passage rate, which is pretty high if you compare us to other schools. So we're trying to get that last 10% all the way there on the first try. We hired Louisa Heine, who is a professor who used to teach at the University of Colorado, to work on this program on a full-time basis, and she started developing those programs. Professor Roski and I are actually working with her on that, as well as Dean Adler. And what we're looking at is expanding the way that we provide student assistance, which we already offer in the first year. We're talking about expanding that into the second and third year, sort of a tutoring program to help students work on their skills. We're talking about potentially integrating that program into some of the classes, so you'll have chances to work on practice multiple choice tests throughout law school that will help prepare you for the bar exam. We're talking about expanding the curriculum, maybe in a way to offer a bar prep class in the third year that would help you get ready with the skills you might need for the bar exam. And we're also in some initial talks with some of the commercial services like Barbary about how we might partner with them to help train students as well. But we think our student body is certainly good enough and smart enough that we can easily get to that 100 metric, and that's our firm goal.
And I just want to emphasize how invested the faculty is in that 100-100 goal. I mean, as I said, I've just been doing, on the employment side, a lot of sort of aggressive phone calls and letter writing to get people jobs. But I've also sort of joined this committee, and we're looking very carefully to figure out what exactly it is that could help us identify people who need a little more help to make sure that they're going to pass the bar, and to approach that issue in a very sensitive way and a supportive way. And then what exactly are the skills? We have this program with Professor Hill and Professor Richards, and one of the things we did is look at the data, and it's incredible. If you actually do that program, your odds of passing the bar skyrocket. And the problem is that some people are just not doing the program, and we're just figuring out how to make that happen. But we I think, have a pretty good sense of what you need to pass the bar and what we need to teach you. And we're real invested in that. And then just more broadly, I teach criminal law, so does Professor Cassell and Professor Bauman. And I also teach constitutional law. We have had folks at the library pull old bar exam questions, and sort them by subject matter so that we can bring them into the classroom during the semester. So you actually have real experience on a multiple choice question and a written question from an old bar exam that helps you sort of get used to it.
Just to underscore Professor Rossi's point, I met with Professor Heine earlier this week. And we are very serious about this. The statistical analysis she gave me was a folder this thick. And we're trying to really understand anything we can do to help our students.
And I want to reinforce what Professor Roski is saying by getting back to small by design. If you're in a small community, you shouldn't have to fear getting help. You know, everyone needs help at some time. When I'm writing an article and I'm stuck, I may go to Lincoln and ask him for help. It's a small, supportive community, so we help one another. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad student. It means that you're stuck on one particular thing, and we need to help you get over that barrier. And that's really our commitment to you in a small student body. Yes?
Given that you mentioned how rigorous the first year
So when is the best time to get involved in student organizations or organizations around campus? Or both?
I'd say your first year. Don't wait. Life's it's a smorgasbord. Fill up your plate. Don't overfill your plate, but just get started and have fun and enjoy it. I wouldn't wait. I don't. If you start your first year of law school and you think, oh, I'm just gonna crush these books and not do anything else, I don't know. But I mean that may work for some people. But if you're interested, follow your curiosity, follow your interests and your passions. That's not going to usually lead you astray. Find something that's noble and interesting and meaningful to you, and then do it.
It's our first year class that organized a spirit run, a 100-mile relay run around campus in a couple of weeks to support the 100-100 initiative. That's our first year students. Dean Dickey, do you have anything to add on that?
I agree with everything Hannah said. During intro week, I'm sure you've heard about intro week. It's just for law school. Sign up and join. Yes, do it then. The student organization. Our goal will be more up to events and stuff.
If you haven't met her yet, Dean Barbara Dickey is our fabulous Dean of Students. Other questions? Yes. By when do you need to decide to take a certificate?
Yeah, so I think it's really important. I think Professor Roskin and I would agree on this, to take a lot of different kinds of classes in law school and get that breadth. And there are some classes that you just you want to take, even though you want to do transactional law, you should still take evidence so you know that material, right? So you could decide as late as the beginning of your third year that you want to do a certificate and still achieve one. It would be a little bit tighter, but you could also say, I'm interested in maybe 2 or 3 of these at the beginning of your second year, and so I'll lay the initial groundwork so I could do any one of them, and then sort of pick. And you could potentially achieve more than one certificate if you wanted, but you would have to plan for that.
Yeah, effectively, that's a math question. There's no day that you have to decide. It's 17 credits, and frankly, that's not a really high bar in terms of the number of credits. You've got, 88. So you have to devote 17 of them to one subject.
Any other questions? Yes, sir. What are the clinical opportunities?
Yeah, so I think I keep getting some of these questions because I'm the academic dean, so I have to look at the whole curriculum. We have a lot of clinical opportunities. We have a couple of in-house clinics. One is the Innocence Clinic that the Dean Adler mentioned previously, that Professor Anderson runs, where you work on people who've been wrongfully convicted, and those are really cool cases. You've probably maybe seen documentaries about them too. And then the other one is a public policy clinic where we work on public policy issues. Lincoln Nearing is one of our adjunct professors, runs that program. And then we have myriad other clinics that pretty much, if there's something you want to do a clinical experience in, you can do. So the 3 most popular are a criminal clinic where you go actually handle cases in court as a third-year student. Our civil clinic where you work on a variety of different civil issues, and then our judicial clinic where you go intern for a judge and work in the judge's chambers for a semester, or maybe some people do it for longer than that. But pretty much if there's any area that you want to work in on a clinic, we have that experience for you. Professor Linda Smith has been working on these for decades now, and we really are one of the most respected schools in the country for that. And part of the thing that makes our clinics so good is that we have classes that go along with them, right? So if you're going to do the civil clinic, you'll take a lawyering skills class that trains you in that. If you take the judicial clinic, you're going to have a judicial process class that teaches you how to think like a judge and what the kinds of things they have to worry about are. If you do the criminal clinic, you do the criminal process class. So we have classes that go along with them that help you learn those skills and reflect on your experience as you're doing it.
Isn't there there's some ranking number, prestigious thing about our clinics that I'm supposed to know that I have a feeling that the dean knows?
Yes, actually, I mentioned it earlier. We are second in the country in the number of clinical opportunities per student. So it's not a subjective measure, it's a very objective measure. I want to amend one thing. The court system and the bar are changing the student practice rule. So now second-year students can
That's right.
practice in court. This was actually a little bit of a disadvantage we had relative to some of the neighboring states, and that has now been eliminated. So I think we have time for one more question. And there was one more hand. Yes. So how do you decide if you're not sure what area of law you want to practice in?
Yeah, so three or four things, right? So one thing is that during the first year, you'll be exposed to a number of different areas of the law, so you'll start to get a taste, right? I went to law school thinking I'd love constitutional law, and then under the withering questioning of our dean at the time, and I also thought, well, maybe she's picking on me. She's asking me this religious liberties case, and I'm the only Mormon student in the room. What is she doing? I decided maybe I didn't really love constitutional law, but then I loved environmental law because I took that class. So one thing is in the first year you get a lot of experience, and in your second year you should take some variety of classes and sort of taste that as well. So that's one way, right? Another is our clinical programs. You can do a clinical placement and get credit for it. And get some of that experience right away without much risk, right? And maybe you'll really decide you love family law. Maybe you'll really decide you love intellectual property law, and you haven't really thought about that before. And then I guess the third and the fourth thing is, students will take jobs over the summers sometimes. Sometimes they're paid, sometimes they're not, and you get that experience that way, and you'll see on a sort of more in-depth basis whether you might like that field. And then the last thing is that our professional development office does a really good job of offering programs throughout the year that you can go to where they have people come in and talk about different careers that they have and what it's like to practice in their field, and you can start to network that way and get to know those people, but also to hear about what it's like to practice in that field. You don't need to know coming into law school at all what you want to do with your degree.
And that's part of the reason I think that we set the credit requirement for these certificates not too high, so that there was, if you think about it, so 88 credits in 3 years, that's about 29 credits a year, 17 you need for a certificate. So you can do that, and you can decide, almost whatever you want. If you decided that you wanted a second certificate in the last 3 weeks of law school, you might not have the math to do it, but you can wait 2 years in to think about a specialty. And I just want to say this, for hundreds of years, there have been no certificates in law schools, and everything's been fine, and people have practiced law and specialized or become wonderful general litigators or transactional lawyers. So you can also just get a law degree, which is already specialty. It's not a medical degree, right? So it's not necessary to specialize. So you shouldn't feel pressure about that. If you are curious about the law, as Chris said earlier, that's enough. Come in and stay curious about the law. That's great.
So a couple of things in closing. One, let me repeat what I said earlier. If you have questions for me, please contact me, email, phone. I'll get back to you. If I'm not the best person to talk about that, I may have someone else get back to you, but we will get back to you. Number two, one of the best things about this law school is that we have the best Dean of Admissions in the country, and I want to acknowledge Reyes Aguilar for his role here. And third, I want to ask you to help me thank our panel. Thanks very much.
I'm sure the same goes for all of us. If you have any questions, now or later, send us an email, call us, or come up now and ask a question.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone. So the next session we're moving on to is the mock